Record. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is a Zuni Pueblo Indian elder and member of the tribal orders of the Kachina Priesthood, Galaxy Medicine Society, Sun Clan, and Wisdom Keeper of the Zuni history and spiritual practices. He is a retired civil environmental engineer and has worked for Shell Oil Company and various U.S. government programs for housing, planning, design, and construction of Indian reservation infrastructures and school projects. He also served in the U.S. Public Health Service as a commissioned officer to provide services to American Indian communities and as the National Environmental Justice Coordinator of the 561 federally recognized Indian tribes. He coordinated with various agencies of federal, state, and tribal governments to enforce laws and regulations to protect sacred sites and lands against desecration, pollution of natural resources, illegal taking of artifacts, burials, and sacred objects. Welcome to the show, Clifford Mahooty.
Glad to be here.
I'm so glad we finally made this happen. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you on. We met a few years ago at Contact in the Desert, and I looked at a little bit of what you share. It's really mind-blowing. Do you want to just give us a little bit of background on who you are? And I'll just let you take it from there because your knowledge is really deep, and I'm just so glad that we were finally able to make this happen.
Well, basically what you talked about is my bio. I started out as I was born and raised in Zuni, New Mexico, and I got involved with a lot of different activities even when I was a young boy. And in those days, we had teachings from very high spiritual systems, and when our tribe was still intact, without outside interference, to do our rituals, to do our ceremonies, and to be participating in various spiritual activities. One of the things that we also had on the reservation was that we had the Bureau of Indian Affairs school system, and my generation started out with a state public school system. So at a very young age, I got interested in mathematics, and which led me to my career in engineering. On the other side of the same coin was the teachings of all the things that was very relative to our Pueblo system, including the history, all the different ways to participate in our ceremonies, and also to have respect for our land and how to take care of it. So it's a mass system that we have to go through. And when you're a kid like that, growing up on the Indian reservation, it's just a constant thing, and it was not hard because it's a daily activity. I was born when there was no electricity, no running water, no systems that were transportation. We didn't have any cars in those days, so I grew up in the wagon and horses type transportation. And later on, it's right after during World War II is when I was born. So after that, I saw the whole development since I was 5 years old, even to the day that Sputnik, and then between those times that we were taught the Western world education, mathematics, history, the basic things that used to be in those days. After Sputnik is when I really got interested in the sciences and in the mathematics. We had a very good education system, especially in the junior and high school level, that geared us toward the technology and the sciences and also the other social science system. So I had a very good education, but also on the other side, our education is like it was the total village that taught us. We are basically an agricultural based community. So we learn how to plant. Some of our tribal members also had cattle and herds of sheep. So they also had they also know how to utilize the land in a balanced way. So I saw everything that is very basic to the ecosystem, and of course, water is very important to where we came from, or at least where I was born. So from the beginning, I saw this firsthand information given to me by my parents, my grandparents, and also the extended community. The community was, that some woman wrote a book called "It Takes a Village," and so that's what we took our society is based on that. If you did something on one side of the village or out in the field, by the time you got home, they already knew about what you did. So we also had the moccasin network that worked more efficiently than the modern day electronic gadgetry. So we were a closed system. It's also a matrilineal society. So all the women hold all the power. We just we're just a practicing male human beings in our society. So anyway, this is basically what my childhood was. And when you talk about the Kachina, all the young men in the village are initiated into the Kachina society. There's many different other orders, such as the medicine societies and the clan systems, and very, very specialized groups that take care of the balance on the spiritual part. I do not know that their backgrounds or their details, so I don't attempt to talk about those things. But I know they exist. And then, of course, the clan system is one of the most basic ones, which is sort of related to the other Pueblo people, including our brothers and sisters to the south. Our people also are very familiar with our people in Mexico, what is now present Mexico. And we also have the same information about our creation, but with many variances due to the location. So I've been doing this for some time. I first got into, before I got into talking about these things, I used to be like my bio reads, I used to work in many different organizations in the private sector, in many programs under the federal government, and also in the state governmental systems and the tribal organizations. So I've seen a whole lot of things from about the 60s on as a working member in these different trades and professions. When you talk about these government programs, I was the director of the Indian Housing Program in the 70s for the Southwest Indian tribe. Prior to that, I would work for Shell Oil Company. I was a refinery engineer, so I saw what the chemical and the damage that is caused by not only the land and the water, but also the air damage that a lot of these refineries do. And this is firsthand. And having done a lot of other programs, I used to run a national office for Indian schools all over the country, including Alaska. So I saw the environmental changes during my tenure up in Alaska, especially with those natives up there. And for the last 15 years, before I retired 10 years ago, I was what they call the environmental justice coordinator for all those tribes you mentioned. 561 different tribes, all both coasts, here up to Alaska, and of course out here in the Southwest. So with that background, I saw firsthand what has happened to this country, and of course, most of all, what has happened to the people. The people at this time are out of balance, just like people are nature is also out of balance. One of the last things that I worked on was the casinos and the American Indian Reservation casinos throughout the country. And because you have to have an environmental assessment, and in a lot of cases you got to have an environmental impact statement. That was my duty to go and be the first person with an engineering and environmental background to be the support and the help for all Indian tribes in that capacity. One of the things that I found out later on after I retired was that XL pipeline up in Standing Rock, South Dakota. I was willing to go up there and lend my expertise, even though I was retired already. But the reason that a lot of things happened in that area was basic two things. First of all, is the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or the caretaker of all the land of what they call trust land. They failed on their project. And the second one was that the Indian chiefs were provided letters, which is a formality for when any project is to be done, whether it be a highway, whether it be a housing project, or in this extreme case, it was a oil pipeline. So these are the things that is the human element that causes a lot of these damages to occur. So when I saw what happened, I just immediately said that it's not going to do me any good to go in there because they did not do the preliminary work. So this is why it's very important when I talk about education to the Indian communities, that we have to learn how to find out what everybody's trying to do to our land and also to the people. I saw a lot of these things when I was working, so this is what I mean by first-hand knowledge and experience. And our people have got to learn how to take into consideration. When I say our people, I'm talking about the 95% of the people which they do not have any representation on Indian reservations. Most of our tribal leaderships are following the same pattern as the United States government. It's based upon that setup, and they have this favorite term called a one-on-one relationship, government to government relationship. For example, you take in the reservation, the only person that will be talked to is the tribal chief, the tribal governor, the tribal chairman, and it's the Bureau of Indian Affairs that has that responsibility. All other federal agencies do not have an open door with them. They have to channel everything through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So that's one person. In my opinion, the Bureau of Indian Affairs have failed the Indian people for centuries, and it's still going on. That's another factor. The government is not helping the American Indians to take care of their land and their people. So I used to talk about these things, but I believe that they had been scared, because if you spoke up, if you're a tribal member and spoke up on an Indian reservation, that your home is there, this is why you're held captive, so to speak. So these are the things that are very important for the audience, your audience, and your people to know. And also the the thing that I hear about everywhere is that now that the Indians have casinos, they can be the richest people in the United States. That is an absolute untruth. That is a big lie, and whoever is doing that has never even looked at some of the details of the compacts that they go into. Of course, the casino owners make the hefty part of the money. The state gets it, some money in a percentage, and the federal government is the one that's supposed to negotiate, and a lot of your tribal members, when the money goes into the tribal members, maybe some of them are fair distribution, but most of them they have to find out what is the real amount, and that's where the problem lies. Most tribes don't know how much money is generated by their casinos, and in my opinion, they're only giving a tiddling to the tribal members. So these are the things that affect two things. First of all is the people. The people, it affects their well-being and also the environment. So if you look at one of the things that I mentioned about is that Indian reservations haven't conquered alcoholism, domestic violence, drugs, other forms of poverty, and now we introduce gambling, and that is you're doing it. You're wasting your money in a way that you're not drunk. So this is an addition to the the things that are bad that's going on the reservation. And of course, the money that is generated on there, you never see any accounting of it. Even if there is an accounting, it's just like the rest of the United States of America. They hold it like a secret, and nothing is transparent. And it's just a big dog, uh, the big dog being the federal government, the little dog being the reservation. They work exactly alike, and they're in tandem, and because of the way that the government set up the tribal governments. So people have to become educated, and this is what I have been trying to do with a lot of different groups. There's some groups that are coming in, especially with the Star Children that's already here, and there's a lot of groups that I work with just to convey this message. However, when I participate in some of these activities, we're still in the powwow mode. We do not have the direct in, information transfer because we're still acting like Hollywood Indians. It's time to quit that and actually go into some very, very uh, truthful approach to what our problems are. And this is why I made up my mind that I will be a messenger. So I have been criticized. I have been ostracized by my own tribe, but it doesn't make any difference to me because that's what I made my life to be when I was a young boy. So it falls in the spiritual and religious category of we are we make ourselves to be certain people to carry on this message. I am not an expert in anything, nor do I claim to be a healer or any of these special powered people. All I'm doing is that I'm giving back in the information that I learned not only from my tribal elders and academia through the spiritual networking. So it's quite a task, but I really enjoy doing it, just like I enjoyed doing engineering projects.
Wow, Clifford. Well, thanks for sharing all that. And, when I hear you speak, and we've had a few conversations very similar to my friend who you're recently meeting, David Lomber Senepas, who is an elder of the Mi'kmaq nation and people. And a lot of your history and a lot of how you acquired your knowledge is very similar. And so maybe, I know there's a lot that you can talk about. There's prophecies and hieroglyphs and education and things like that. One of the things you mentioned, I think is important, is firsthand knowledge. So maybe you can share a little bit about how you were taught, where your knowledge came from, and some of that knowledge, because when we're speaking and I'm speaking with David, I'm a little bit more open-minded than some people, maybe less than others, but those stories are very different than my upbringing. You're very, very different, and there's a lot more. And this isn't something that's normal to a different way, a Western society. These are new concepts, but this was your upbringing. This was your reality. And one of the talks I saw you give, you might be the last one that got you're saying in the Zunis, maybe the last one who learned this way, that you had the oral teachings passed down and you went through that process. Is that true? Maybe you can speak on that.
Well, I think in one of those sessions, I talk about I may be the last of the Mohicans, so to speak, of the Zuni system. There was a time, I believe it might have happened right after Kennedy was shot in 1963, because I started seeing the overall uh, nation going down, sliding off into the direction. Prior to that time, again, before we had these technological things that were became a deviation. Television, if you want to look at it from the sociological, psychological part of a civilization, television was the first thing that deviated my community from the spiritual practices which were going on 24 hours a day. When television was introduced in Zuni, there was only two TV sets in the whole village in about 1960, I would say. And one of them was my aunt, my my maternal aunt or paternal aunt had one of those TVs, and the other one was at another place, and the third one was at a post office. The postmaster had that, but there was not. We were not allowed to see that. So television was the worst thing that ever happened, in hindsight now, of what people started getting away from the tension that we grew up in. Because at that time, people used to talk. They used to talk to each other. We had extended families. And of course, at that time, it was a farming community. We had all kinds of water. And then we also had social dances that occurred periodically. And that uh, made the community interact socially and also in a religious, spiritual way. Religion and spirituality, I've always said, are two separate things. But the definition in the religion in our tribe is not man-made like other religions. And I say religion serves only two purposes. First of all, it's a religion is for fear and control. And so that we were introduced, or at least the Spanish came in 1540, 1539. So we were the first tribe in this part of the world to be exposed to the Spanish of the God, gold, and glory. And one of the things that they brought with them was greed. So if you look at religion, that's where actually the religion actually started coming in, which was basically for fear and control. So this happened with the Southwest Indian tribes, but there's only two tribes that really never fell for it 100%, which was the Zuni and the Hopi. The rest of the other tribes were conquered, and they automatically switched over to become the religious groups of the Catholic Church in this case. So this is where also it started. They started incorporating based upon the history books that I've reviewed and researched, and they actually became incorporated into our spirituality, which was perhaps the wrong move. But then again, they had bigger weapons, they had bigger armies, and so this is where they started becoming in step with it, primarily for survival. So now you fast forward a little bit, and then the federal government got involved. We started having our attacks, or rather, right before then was the invasion of the Navajo, what they call the Diné from the north. This I understand is the descendants of the Mongolian people up in Mongol, that the white man says that they came through the ice polar cap, Thuringia, the Bering Strait. So that was another effect on it, but it didn't have a big effect on it, but as on the social side. By the time they came over here or showed up, places like Chaco Canyon were already abandoned. Mesa Verde up in Colorado, Canyon de Chelly in Arizona were abandoned. So they had survived, and then the Army started coming in the 1800s. The Army was the first ones that, United States Army were the first one that built school out in the West, and the first one was in Zuni. They even treated them like the kids, like military training. What do you call it? They did the military routines with them. They had to march. They had to get up in the morning, have revel, and all that, and up to about 1930s. And one of the biggest things that happened was that, well, in 1889, remember when they had the Indian Removal Act was passed by Congress, and that's when they started getting rid of the Indians from all parts of their native lands and sent places like Oklahoma and other places, Trail of Tears and so on. But in the case of Zuni, they put up with it, and as time went on, the military started moving in because of certain things, practices of self-discipline of the Zuni people. The biggest thing that happened in the 1800s was that the Zunis had a self-controlling system of people that were not in step with the sociological religious system. And when they started taking on the self-discipline, the army showed up to protect those people that had violated many different rules of society. So that also became a factor in losing their connection and move forward. And then right after that is the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian Institution did a lot of damage in terms of sacred sites, the paraphernalia that we use for um, medical curing practices, even some of the hardware, not hardware, but say like they used to have altars and prehistoric things that used as part of the rituals for curing and also for weather control. So, and also to food sources. So the Smithsonian did a lot of damage by taking away those things to put it in their museum. And later on is the Indian Reorganization Act in the 20s, when they started coming in and taking away land because a lot of people were overgrazing, which is up in Navajo country. And and after it went on, and of course, we were still not citizens of the United States of America. And when World War One and World War Two started, the Zuni people even went to war for it. And they're not even part of the United States of America. So these are the things that when I talk about education, our people have to go back and find out why they're treated the way we are today, and what rights do they have, and what caused it, and even part of our people was part of it. When I talk about stealing of our artifacts in the religious system, there's many books that have been written about it. That it's everything is done as an inside job. I don't care if it's 9/11. I don't care if it's a bank robbery. They just had while we're talking, they just had a shootout here at one of the casinos over in Arizona at Mazatzo, I believe. And the first thing that I said was it was an inside job. So there's a lot of things that occurred on the Zuni, and they blamed each other for many, many years. Fast forwarded to 1963 when Kennedy was shot. That's where a lot of things changed overnight. I was talking about television. And this is where the Office of Economic Opportunity, created by Kennedy, carried out by Johnson, came into play. I was part of that community organizer group, so to speak. And I worked on those projects in the Zuni Reservation. And eventually, starting from that, well, we had a welfare program, but it was for very few programs. But what they call a community action program introduced a lot of projects that had a lot of money to it. And this is where a lot of people didn't start losing their practice, because it was easier to get money working in the village, getting a paycheck every 2 weeks or whatever. And then they just sort of start setting their religious and spiritual activities aside, and not continue to practice periodically what was supposed to be happening. So influence from external forces on an Indian reservation has caused a lot of hardships. And even to this day, and then it was good up to a point, and then I worked on what they call which is now Public Law 93-638 in 1966, which later became law. It's called the Indian Self-Determination and Education Act. When I first worked on it, I was about 22 years old, and we wrote the backbone for it in the Zuni Council, and it eventually became law under Nixon in 1974. This is the law that allows the Indian tribes to take the programs from the Bureau of Indian Affairs and have the Indians run the programs themselves, whether it's an education program, whether it's a road construction program, building construction, and eventually HUD and Indian Health Service under what is presently now HHS. So now that law, it came into effect on the Indian reservation. Again, it's a great law, but it's just like the United States Congress. They have the wrong people running the show. And it was a very, very good idea. It was an extremely brilliant idea to get rid of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. But now the Bureau of Indian Affairs is right on top of that, more so than ever. And this is where a lot of Indians, again, have to go back and get educated, not only for their own execution of those programs directly from the federal government, but also to find out what the projects are supposed to to be for. I mean, they have. If you look at two basic things, casinos, for example, one of the requirements when I worked on those projects was that casinos were supposed to be run by the Indians. You can go to any casino in the United States of America. If you walk up there and you look at their management structure, there is not one Indian running the management. Yes, they have. They hired Indians, but they're the ones that roll around the carts to make change. They're the ones that are behind the booth to take care of membership, and they're the ones that work in the kitchen, and a lot of them are just janitors. So this is what the government, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, had caused as their spokesperson to make the Indian tribes still make them look like they don't know what they're doing because they're uneducated. This is again the reason, one of the other reasons that I come out to talk about things that are not right according to the law. And if they're not going to comply with the law, there has to be some group that has to come in there and verify that these things are taken care of. And that's where the Indian people should be as that controlling and governing board. Even though the boards are up there, they're also, we have what they call nepotism on Indian reservation. It's the elite, just like the federal government and the United States Congress. Only the elite are the ones that make money, regardless of what they know or don't know. And most of those people are uneducated, again, just like the United States Congress. I am not afraid to say these things because I worked in the swamp for 20 years and I worked with all federal agencies, had to deal with them on a daily basis. And not only the agencies themselves, but also the politicians that ran those that ran the government. I think a good example is what when I told Dave Lomber about was I was up in Maine. I was working on the Lauren Air Base transfer to the Indian tribe, and what was sad about that case was they were going to give the most polluted land on the military base to the Mi'kmaq Indians. And I fought my own people in the Department of the Interior, and I could not get them to understand the simple things about the law because all they were controlled by the two politicians of that state, and they were looking at that prime piece of property for their own personal use. For example, they wanted the golf course to be transferred to one of the senators and leave where they used to have the petroleum dump site where they had all the petroleum products. It would take at least $1 billion to clean out the polluted land, and that was a portion that they were going to give the Mi'kmaq tribe. So these are the things that are happening every day. So that's why I stress education. We have so many programs in education. For example, you mentioned that I was the United States Public Health Service. When I got into that, I found out that they have what they call a co-step program. You can actually start out with public health service and they pay for your education, whether you want to be a nurse, an engineer, a surgeon, or dentist, and they pay for your whole education. All you do is you come back and you commit yourself 2 years for everyone. Let's see, 2 years for every year that they finance you, and you also get a commission as a commission officer. So these are the programs that are out there. But so when I used to travel and I tell them about this, they never tell them about these different programs. When I was going through college, we also had a co-op program in State Highway Department and NASA at that time. And right now, with the present administration going on there, now they're opening up the doors for that type of working apprenticeship programs, even not only in the trades, but also in the intern programs in the other professions, whether it be law, engineering, or medicine. So these people have, the American Indian community has so much opportunity once they get rid of two basic things. First of all, is the Bureau of Indian Affairs to get them out of the way. And the second thing is to get educated and hire, or rather vote for the best available individual of the tribe. That's going to be a hard one because I tried that with my community and I did not get elected. So that's really a sad situation.
Holy smokes. I think that's it. And what you shared there was just a brief sample of, your history and knowledge and how deep it goes. And you kind of watched it step by step by step,
Yes.
from, where it was before, wherever that was. Do you want to, so I'm going to let you keep talking and share and go wherever you want, because I know anything I tee up, you're able to go really deep. Do you want to share a little bit about what you were taught and some of the knowledge that you hold, and share that with some of the people that might have it? Or do you want to give some more history on maybe some things that we don't know?
No, I think one of the things that a lot of people ask me is that where did you get all your knowledge? And I I said I'm a very humble man. When you come right down to it, it's called homework. We all have to do our homework, and that's one thing that my mom and dad used to stress, and my elders is that you got to work, you got to learn. I don't care if you're going to be a farmer. I don't care if you're going to be a medicine man. I don't care if you're going to be a Kachina leader. You have to learn not only the history, but also the prayers. One thing that my tribe has is that we don't have a written history. Everything is oral history. You can go back to Zuni any day and attend those ceremonies. These people are very, very expert in saying the prayers, the chants, the songs. And that's because they've been repeating it for centuries and centuries. And that's where the teaching, the basic teaching comes from. Not only do they teach you the religious and the technological systems, but also how to be a human being. They taught us about respect of everything. You do not go over there and hurt other people. You do not hurt other animals, whether it be an ant, a bug, and everything has life, whether it be a stone, whether it be a tree, whether it be another animal, a four-legged animal. They all have lives, and you treat them like as if they were your own brothers and your own mothers and your own sisters. So that's the first basic thing that you're taught, and you are taught as in the beginning about many different things relative to in your home, which why you have to sleep in a certain direction, what to do when the sun comes up in the morning, the prayers that you have to go through. When you sit down to eat, you you give thanks for the food, and you have to provide what we call cutting part of your meal, and you give it to your ancestors. And as time goes on, when you start becoming in different societies and groups, you also give that. You feed them first, is what they tell us. You feed the ancestors and the gods first before you eat. That alone in itself is the respectful ways to be part of the world and also all the living things. So this can go on forever, but I don't know if they still do that in Zuni today. I go to a lot of ceremonies. That is still going on, but and I'm sure that they still have that in their own homes. So that's one way of looking at life in an overall universe. We never die. We only take we only take what is needed, no more. And when I remember when my dad used to take us to get wood for firewood, before we even chop any wood, he would take us and he would ask the trees for their okay, I guess, and also to give them the blessing. We use cornmeal for blessing, to bless the trees. And he said that when you bless those trees, you do not cut where you made your blessing. You go a different direction and away from that because you blessed it. So these are the basic things that are taught. And then also, when you are a young person, you have to respect all your elders, all your parents. One of the things that I never did in my whole life is that I never call my mom or my dad by their first name, or even my grandparents. I never call them by their first name. That's a that's what they taught you as part of respect. So that we I don't know how much it goes on today, and I believe that it's not done anymore. I have a lot of people that come and talk to me, but they don't teach them the history of what their position in life is. A lot of them have been the old timers, and their parents have passed away, and that transfer was never made to take care of certain things as part of their rituals. They don't know how to pray anymore for their group efforts or group requirements. So this is where a lot of our elders deviated from, primarily because of other things that were not conducive to uh, carry, carrying these traditions on to the younger people. That's why the younger people are really in confused stage, and they try to teach them with bilingual education, which is good, but there are many details that are sort of sacred knowledge type thing. So you only learn that in certain groups, certain activities. The language is there. All the Indian kids can speak their language. But when it comes down to that, there's a lot of prayer systems that include ancient names, ancient language, which is very hard to decipher. I had a difficult time myself, and I was taught. So can you imagine the kids nowadays, and the teachers are no longer around. So what they teach is not full anymore. They just do it on a sort of like a reader's digest version, which which again is not effective when it comes to spirituality. In one of my orders, I asked my my members of the society, is how come we did not sing that prayer or song? And I was told because it's going to take a long time. I said, yeah, but we skipped a lot of things, especially with the new initiates, that they did not get that information, and they just kind of avoided me. So this is what goes on in a normal day anymore. They're too busy wanting to go. I don't know what to make money, or whether they're just lazy. I do not know. So this is where we're losing that portion of that spirituality also. So again, it's our own fault. No white man has come over here and said that you can't do that no more. We're the ones that are doing it for ourselves.
Well, What I'm thinking is like I'm kind of want to go two ways with it. The first one is just curious about, do you see a solution for getting this knowledge passed down? Because I see it as sacred knowledge, that should be shared. And maybe if you had any thoughts on how you could or anyone keep the information going. And then second, maybe sharing your view on, because I know you were on Gaia TV, and there's a lot of let's just say stuff about dimensions, aliens, star people, sky people, angels, demons, and you can go down huge rabbit holes. And in that field, of which those rabbit holes I have personally gone down, they're very fascinating. You've got Antarctica, you've got all kinds of stuff, but you kind of stand apart a little bit in the same way that David Lombert Senepas does, in a very congruent teaching, a very firsthand teaching, a very firsthand knowledge that's a little bit different. And it seems to be able to cut through, what could be partial truth or exaggerated truth with a different understanding. And maybe you could share just some of your teachings or thoughts on how you were taught about beings, star beings, even like angel realms, which are the Kachinas, and give your perspective on that.
Well, that's kind of hard to relate, especially when with the communication network that we have. I mean, anybody in my village can look into any thing that I have done, and the first thing they'll say is that, well, that guy's a liar. Well, that guy is talking about things that are sacred, and I've been accused of being an evil person. So it's very difficult to put anything on the air. The way I do it is that I do it on places where there's no recordings made, because I think it's very important that, in the combination of the two, first of all, is the spirituality part of it, and also the technological part, and again, going into those rabbit holes. There's a lot of things that are there that they look at it in a very negative way, especially when it's the information. And one of the things that I learned, especially with trying to figure out why they're against me, is the jealousy factor, because they themselves do not know the origin or what these things are about. So when I talk about it, the immediate thing is that this guy's a liar. So that I had to deal with that. One of the things that we did was that in the eclipse last year with Corey Good at Mount Shasta, I had a Hopi partner that exposed the hoax of the Blue Star Kachina. And that the hoax is, according to him, is that the Blue Star, there's no such thing as a Blue Star Kachina come into the plaza and take its mask off, and it will be an alien. That's what somebody wrote up. And this had been going on for a number of years. And so he decided that this has gone too far. So we're going to talk the truth. And when we did that, he got bombarded on the internet and he was really threatened. And they also threatened me. The Hopi tribe and others threatened me, and people that I actually helped financially when they were down on their luck. They're the ones that came on TV or just the internet and said that I am a liar, I am evil, and I'm a misinformation. And they also, I understand that the Hopi tribe threatened me not to come on the reservation because if I went on there, that I would be arrested. So these are the reasons why it's very, very difficult to do something on the internet. Going back to that Hopi guy that asked me for his help to do this, when I went back to him to go to the second one, we had so many things that we wanted to do. I think at that time we had about 10 things that we were going to do. We only opened with that one, and he did not even want to talk to me. So these are the things that we have to go through in order to be the messenger or spokesperson. And I never say that this is my information or here's what I always have to say that this is what I was taught. And then when I was taught this, I went to find out. And usually I found out what that was all about. I do not have any special ways of doing it. If you are curious enough and want to know about it in a scientific manner, you can eventually get to that point. For example, flying saucers have been around since the beginning of our time. And there's a one, so the I was at a meeting last at the city ranch up in James Gilliland, and we actually saw a bunch of them, and also Bigfoot. So if you talk about these things, immediate response is that, well, this guy's making things up. So I have been kind of guarded myself to convey these things, but I think that eventually, when I find a good way to do this, I will eventually go that route because I'm already there. I mean, you can't what's that? You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. So, but I wish that they would go along and say, well, you're wrong here, and here's the right information. That would be an honor for them, but they don't want to do that. I think it boils down to knowledge is power, and it's always been like that. And they were taught. The other thing too that was taught in Zuni was that they accepted the Catholic Church into the village way back in the 1500s. So a lot of those tribal leaders in the spirituality groups they also belong to the Catholic Church. So that's a conflict of interest when it comes down to that. And the other thing too is that they also are connected with the financial group. A good example is that they used to go the tribal leaders of the very high order systems. They used to take them down on a trip down the Grand Canyon for a number of years, at least 20 years that I can decipher from that. Is that every time they go down there, they give them a lot of money. And I don't know what this what do you call it, National Historic Society. But what they did was that the Zuni identified their places of sacred places, in places of vortices and things like that, mineral deposits. And what I told him was that they have the technology that while you were pointing it out, they dropped a little pellet in there, and after you guys are gone, all they have to do is fly over, or now they can pick it up with a satellite, and they know exactly where a certain spot is, the sacred site is, and they already picked it up even while you were still standing there. So these are the things that irritate a lot of people because they do not have the educational background about the technology to identify. You know, right now every cell phone's got even the one that we're speaking on right now, it's got tracking devices in it. So, so so these are the reasons that I believe that a lot of people are very reluctant when I talk about things that, to me, it's something that is basic in our history and our knowledge, but to them, they want to keep it like that. So again, this is where the greed comes in. If you're the only one that knows about things, you'll be the only one contacted. One of the things that is not true is that they think that I get a lot of money for things that I'm doing right now. Well, for example, how much money are you giving me for doing this? Zero, right? See, they believe that I have a lot of. When I first went on with Ancient Aliens, they thought that I was making thousands and thousands of dollars. The only thing that I got on my first interview was a ham sandwich, and that so that's not it's not true that I don't make thousands. And the reason I'm doing this is because not for the ones that are attacking me, it's for the future of the kids that are very hungry for knowledge right now. And if you don't carry this tradition on, uh, I'm I'm considered an elder. That's where I got my information when I was a very young boy. If I never got that information, I would have never expanded on it, and I would have just been ignorant with these things, and I would not care about what they're doing to the country, what they're doing to the people, and why it should be intercepted, and why we should expose these people as part of this disclosure project. And the other thing too is that even though they saw me on places like Gaia and other meetings, I'm I'm an individual. I do not belong to anybody's camp, nor am I going to be coerced into doing anything against my will. Also, this thing that I'm doing is an educational progress so that both sides can understand. The white men and the Indians will know all Indian tribes are losing their traditions. A lot of them already lost their language. They don't even have any inkling of what language that they don't know their ancestry. They don't know their whatever they sing. They don't understand what it is. So that's basically why we're these are remnants of information that I talk about. Now you ask if we can, is there some way that we can expand this? Well, that's a very hard question because most of the people that knew this stuff already passed on. They never left any recordings, whether it be on tape or uh, disc or any words. We had a big project in Zuni in 1966 where I got most of the prophecies that I talk about. We took recordings from the elders at that time. I went back there maybe about 10 years ago, and I found out that they just dumped them in the old hospital, vacated old hospital, and all the recordings were lost. I would say that we had at least 1,000 hours of that information. And so these are the type of things that have already occurred, and there's no way we can go back there and get the information of those elders. And they talked about flying saucers. They talked about different types of animals that roam that were uh, not like the other animals. They talked about things that occurred in historical times about the people that came across there prior to the Spaniards. So we're talking about thousands and thousands of years ago. So this is where the education progress that or process should be put into place and try to get as many people to be doing this. I understand in Zuni that they're doing a lot of research and shows, or at least lectures, but most of the information that I have studied was put together by the white man. It was recorded by all the Smithsonian folks. So it's a very wide open field right now. But this is why I was looking for help to start looking at the people that their backgrounds, at least we can all get together and talk from the same history or comparison to come up with it. Because I have learned that all the other Indian tribes have the basic history. We know about Star People. We know about the the uh, the people that put our systems together, and also placement of where the Indians were. And of course, today they took them off of their land, so there's no way to interpret that anymore. I think the only ones that are the remnants are in the southwest and the western part of the United States. So these are very hard questions that need to be answered, and there's no easy solution.
Well, oh man, I appreciate you sharing all that. And as I've kind of stated before, hanging out with David Lone Bear, I feel like his situation was similar to yours in a lot of ways. Very challenging to get the information out, and he'll kind of, one of the things that he'll talk about is getting through the rhetoric. Getting through all of that stuff. And also, like the detriment is some people want the knowledge out, but there are powers that be that don't want the information out at the exact same time. So it kind of puts you in a pickle situation. So I appreciate your just courage to share that. And there is a link. I'll put a link into the description of the talk. That there is one of your talks on YouTube, and you go pretty detailed into some of this stuff. And so some of those topics, and I'll let you just kind of pick up wherever you want. You can go light and graze the surface, or you can go deep if you want. But some of the things that I was curious that you talked about were, I was going to ask you, what is a finished man? And you talk about moving into the fourth world. You've had experiences with, star people and UFOs and beings in your own way. And you also have a lot of petroglyphs that you show pictures of these petroglyphs and some of the knowledge that you have that goes with those images. So maybe you can, and you also talk a little bit about Jacob's Ladder. So all of those I found very fascinating and very informative in ways that I hadn't heard it put before. Maybe you could touch on any of that if you want to elaborate a little bit.
Well, one of the things that you talk about a finished man is that it's sort of when you have completed your life path in this what we call the light world, and then the Zuni people believe that we are given a path that was predetermined. So when you affect your body or your mind and spirit, you are actually affecting your way to become a finished man. And then the other term is used is that is a grown up person, and the finished man. That also, well, that's actually, like I said, you finish your path, and then you became a finished man in the sense that you have learned all the different things that you are supposed to learn in this world. And then after you become a finished man, then it is your duty to transfer that information to the younger ones or the ones that are following you. And then when you ask a question, they say, well, why don't you go ask that? And you say it in a way that is not any more funny, or because you become a very, I guess in a way, what's that term? It would be, like, it becomes like a philosophical individual. You have learned all these great things, and then you become a finished man, and then you also will become also your path, and then you become an elder. Is basically what it amounts to. So now you have this information, and the young people will come and ask you for your guidance or your information that you had acquired through the things that you had gone through. So this is, and then after that, I think in that last one that you, then when you leave this light world, when you die, you go back in there to what we call the afterworld, and then you either become, basically the first thing you become is a rainmaker. That's the one that where the Kachina comes into play. Then you become a grandfather, and then you come as a Kachina, and somebody represents you. If you looked at my Kachina representation, yeah, the definition that I gave on that one, he said you come in the spirit form comes in, and you become that spirit. And you, it's like that joke about the Snickers commercial. You're not you. You're a different thing or person. Or in this case, a Kachina. And after that, you go into many other different dimensions, depending on what your life work was. And in some cases, there's a reincarnation that occurs immediately. There's cases of people coming back to the same tribe. I don't know exactly why it's like that, but they come back and they continue the knowledge. I believe this is where the star children come into play because they already know the stuff that was acquired when they were in this life, in this light world, and they accumulate more knowledge and they're also downloaded in a way from other systems, and when they come back here, they're advanced. So these are what we call their life processes, and you go through many of them. And now where I picked up a lot of that other dimensional information is that what I call cosmic magic, because there's not a word in Zuni that can be interpreted into the English language that interprets the word that we go through, and then it's like magic, but it's not like magic as we know it because magicians use illusions. And when you go into the simplest way I talk about cosmic magic is that when aliens can go through walls, when Bigfoot can disappear instantaneously, you follow his footsteps on the snow, and he's no longer there. He just disappeared. He went into a different dimension. So that's what I talk about, the multi-dimensional beings, and then you keep coming through that because we're all vibration. And then somewhere way up in the different dimensions, then we become a source of energy again. We go back into being a light world. And so this goes into that's what I talk about, the circular path of coming in and out and also actually probably like a spiral because you eventually wind out and you become an energy force. I interpret these in many of my lectures as the what is it, electrical light magnetic force, because these are all, then it goes into the higher physics, but they're all related. This is where the technological and spirituality comes into play. And I think that once uh, David and I get together, I think that we're going to actually set up a matrix type approach to this and see where these actually tie in. Now, the reason that I haven't done any work on these things is that I started out doing this again primarily for the education. And the other thing too was that these book writers and lecturers were telling the wrong information. And that made the American Indian look bad, in many cases silly. And so I had to sort of jump in and say, wait a minute, you guys are making this a mockery. We have far more advanced information and systems than you can imagine. Somebody, and they have, they're part Indian, and my spirit guide told me this, and so I had to jump in there because they were making a lot of money using information that was not true. And I've been to places like Sedona, and there's a lot of information people, whether they're true or not. My first reaction is that where did they get this information? So the more I dug into these things, it's just a repetition of somebody's book or an expansion of somebody's theory, and they actually say, "Well, I actually did this thing." I had a guy talk to me in Serpent Mound saying that he laid out the medicine wheel in Sedona, Arizona, and he was supposed to be 5 miles in diameter. And I said, "How did you get away from the military that controlled all the area around there? And and if you went out there, would you show me how you laid out the circle?" He said that I laid out a circle, and it's very difficult because it's rocky country. There's all kinds of different terrain you have to go through, and so it really became to the point of ridiculousness. And I had to come in there, and there's several of us that jumped into that. And then the book writers, for example, one book writer said that we had a turtle clan in Zuni, and I couldn't convince him that there's no such clan in Zuni. But because he's an expert, he just kind of brushed me away. But at that time, he didn't know I was from Zuni. The other one is a writer that talked about the Japanese living right next to the Zuni people back when the Spanish came. I wanted to correct her because I've studied a little bit of linguistics, and especially on the Zuni part. So, but she didn't want to do that. She ignored me. So that the book's name is the Zuni Enigma. So there's a lot of flaws in that book. So that's why I had to come out and talk about these things. My grandfathers were very high order people. My grandfather Mahooty they said that he was a historian of the tribe. I remember when we were kids, they would ask him to do certain rituals and songs and practices. And I would ask my dad, well, how come he went there? He's not even part of that society. He said, because the society don't know their ways and their songs, so he knows, so they have to recruit him. So that these are, and all I'm doing is following my grandfather's footsteps to acquire knowledge. So in case somebody wants to know, at least I have bits and pieces of it to do this, to transfer that. So there's a lot of things that need to be worked on. And I had been looking for somebody in my own tribe to do this, but so far I haven't found anybody. But my own tribal members, especially the younger generation, are very hungry for this knowledge. But there's nobody teaching them in the right way. And also our medicine societies, I don't know anymore how they're doing this. It becomes the way I look at it from the psychological standpoint. It has become egocentric, and we put the spirituality is in a second tier, and egocentricity comes into play. So that also affects the overall concepts of a lot of the curing practices. And the bad part of it is that we've become Americans. Materialism has become the name of the game. It's keeping up with the Joneses or how much I can get out of this. And not only in my own tribe, but others. I have a lot of Navajo people come to me, other tribes, and they said, I would like to go to a medicine man, but they want so much money so much money and I can't afford it. So therefore, I cannot be cured. This was not the origin of the medicine societies. It was supposed to be the benefit to protect each other and to help each other and for curing point. So again, now the American game has come into play in our societies and in our tribes, which is materialism. Where you got ego, materialism, and the other things that are part of it. So that also affects the destruction or also increases the destruction of that one-to-one contact.
Clifford, every time you finish, I'm just speechless, listening and kind of hypnotized by your sharing. And I've been taking a lot of notes. So one of the things I think that's important is, you're talking about this education, and I was curious if you can speak a little bit about the ancients. Is that kind of where that knowledge came from, like your version of the ancients and then passed down through the elders? Can you speak on that a little bit?
Well, the information it was not made up. It was given to our ancient ancestors. And there's so many volumes of information. And it was primarily given by what we call the raw people. Raw people being in that whole pantheon of different gods of many different orders, and also primarily from the above world people, which we call, for lack of a better term, we call them sky people, star people, upper world people, or the whole group in the Zuni way, it's called the raw people. They're the ones that taught us, and they're the ones that created or upgraded the human, the archaeo Zuni, upgraded them not only in their physiology, but also downloaded them in their mental capacity and gave them the instructions on how to take care of each other, all the songs, the languages, all the different things that to make civilization and the connection with not only the solar system where we're at, but also with these raw people exist everywhere. They're inside the middle of they're inside the earth. They're out in our atmosphere, in other different star systems and constellations. They're from there. And so, including the oceans again. And so we have been taught, or at least our people have been taught by these beings, if you want to call them, and the rituals that they go through, even the clan system. One of the things that I show on those petroglyphs is the clan system, which was developed in their journey to Zuni land, and it's about 20 miles west of Zuni. And that's where I show the partial petroglyphs. And it also shows the petroglyphs of the different clans, whether they be Crane, Sun Clan, the Water Clan, and the different, like the Badger, the Turkey, all the clans that are in Zuni, and even some of them have disappeared. The Sky Clan disappeared, I believe, about maybe 50, 60 years ago. So those are the ones. And also the medicine societies, a lot of them have gone extinct and gone into partner with others. The leftovers are partner with others. So the primary reason for this is because the population, when they increased the population, they did not carry on the information transfer. So a lot of the information was lost. So we've always been told, I asked the question, where did we learn about these things? And you can actually go into a whole day teachings of where they got their information, how they did it, where they came from. but that falls into the category of sacred knowledge. I do not even know what the other society's system is, nor do I know the different orders in the tribe, what their systems are, because they don't transfer that information. But they're supposed to transfer it within those lines of birth or society or clans. But when they, since they did not transfer the information, a lot of them was lost. They still have the ritualistic things in their homes, but they don't know how to talk with them or how to use them anymore. So that's what is very hard to explain to a lot of people. But the information can probably be retrieved, but it's going to take a total effort of the whole tribe, of the elder system, the people that have the knowledge of the different orders, and you can improvise it to make it still work. It's just like tuning up a car or making a brand new car with the parts. You can actually make it work. But in order to do that, you have to concentrate on that particular mission. And right now, I don't think that they're willing to do that, again, because of the jealousy factor. And the American government has made what they're doing right now is that they made everybody fight, divide and conquer. And the things that occurred at what do you call it, a microscopic scale and macroscopic, like Washington, D.C., they're doing exactly the same thing today with all those different peoples that are, they're creating wars in the village, the cities. They're creating hatred by false information. And so that's what also happened within our society many, many years back. And we also now have infiltration of evil people within our communities. And that also is detrimental to the continuance of the good things that we're supposed to be doing. Evil is everywhere.
Wow. Well, when you're sharing that, what it kind of makes me think of is that quote that says, "History is written by the winners." And I'm reminded of the book burnings and the Salem witch trials and all of the insane stuff that's happened in human history. And depending on where you grow up in the world, whether it's USA, Germany, Japan, China, India, whatever the case may be, you have a different history. And even within the history being taught in some of the Western cultures, there's misinformation. But one of the most fascinating things about your culture and your history is that it's a direct line. And it looks like we're at this critical point now where that is at risk of losing that line. And how old is that knowledge? Like, do you have any idea on how long that goes back?
Thousands and thousands of years. If you look at Lemuria, I think it was sunk in what, 22,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, something like that. So we also have that knowledge. We also have knowledge of, or at least the ancestor had knowledge of different people that used to walk among us here. I have a friend that's working right now with the petroglyphs. The petroglyphs are very, very ancient because they come through different stages. Right next to those petroglyphs are the Chinese petroglyphs. So we're talking thousands of years ago, and it's been proven that they're Chinese. So this information has been around, but again, because of the first thing that the American government did, the founding fathers, so-called founding fathers, of course, we all know now that they stole the Iroquois Confederacy government system and called it the Constitution of the United States of America. And once that started, the first thing that they did was to destroy all the different things that were very sacred, like they did in Mexico. All the temples. Of course, those temples are there before the people were even arrived there. In this country, they destroyed a lot of the sacred sites, and after that, they tried to get rid of the Indians, and they couldn't do that, so they just started poisoning them, and then they also kicked them out and moved them over to places like Oklahoma. And all those places all over the country had sacred sites. And if you look at now, you move up the scale a little bit. Where are all the national parks? Grand Canyon being the biggest one. We know for a fact because we did that investigations 4 years back. I don't know if you've seen that clip. I mean, that YouTube that we made. It's called Expedition to Sipapu. It's based upon the I think in 1908 expedition by the Kincaid, and the Smithsonian took all the artifacts out that included Egyptian, Buddhist, and Indian stuff. And there's literally thousands of rooms in the Grand Canyon, and that's why it's shut off. At that time when we filmed this is about 5 years ago, uh, we also found out that they were mining probably for uranium inside the Grand Canyon. This is during Obama's term. So we got that on film, and if you want to look at that, it's on YouTube. It's called Expedition to Sipapu, and it's spelled Sipapu, which is the emergence of the Hopi people. And that's a common term among the Pueblos. Sipapu is the emergence of certain things that sort of like a vortex or what do you call it? Maybe stargates and that type of thing. Photos. So these are many things that we've already done, and there's so many information that I'm trying to get many people to help me on this thing. And so once it's already a start, and I think that once this information is out as part of our disclosure project, then it's going to happen, and that's why the politicals, the swamp animals in Washington D.C. are the tragic rate to not be exposed or have anything exposed. And there's many other groups, but I'll save that for later on because it's rather a very tough situation to really put all the things together because as long as the government is in charge, and they're in charge of all the Indian reservations, and they set it up like that, Indians have no rights because they're sovereign nations. That sovereign nation it's by design, and only in the term they use is government to government relationship. So it's like the dictator in this case is the government through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the only one that can be talked to is the tribal chief, tribal governor, tribal chairman. That's the only one that they can talk to. If you want to go talk to as a tribal member, I want to go to the Department of Interior Bureau of Indian Affairs. I want to ask about this question, and they'll just tell you, go back and talk to your chairman. So it's a real nasty setup. It falls in the same category as a dictatorship, where all Indian reservations are like third world nations when it comes down to the way that they apply things. And Indians don't have any rights because of sovereignty.
That's obviously terrible. And, I have a little bit of an understanding through studying government and curious about how we still had war in modern history. And it's interesting how fast this has happened, because before this podcast started, we talked for like 30 minutes, and every time we have a brief conversation, which has been a little bit more frequently, which I'm grateful for, you share a lot of knowledge. And, we were talking about, or you were talking about how you remember, before there were borders, you look at this floating ball going through space, and all, we have these imaginary borders and these institutions telling us what we can and can't do. And a lot of these things being enforced that are not really for all people. It's not for the greater good. It's for a small portion of good. And people who have, want to know what's going on in the government, or they're really, adamant about that kind of thing, I just say, follow the money, really just have a look at it and follow the money and see what's happening to the planet and what's being suppressed here. There's so much more that I want to talk to you about, and I want to be respectful of your time. So I'm going to throw a few things at you. And if there's anything that you want to talk about, or you feel like we should dive deeper on, feel free by all means. But I was just going to give you a few things that kind of came to mind. With all of this being said, number one, I want you to throw out there, if there's anything that any of these listeners, if they want to be able to help or support you in any way, if there's anything that we can do to support what you're working on, this history, any of your work, just any support that we can do for you, please let us know. Because I'm sure there's going to be people out there that really do want to support your message and what you're trying to do. And then the other thing I was going to kind of throw out there is, a lot of us are living in this world and we've got to struggle to eat. You know what I mean? We're in the illusion. We're caught up with the TV. Some of the prophecies talk about, I think, like losing the heart or something, the heart just and we're disconnected from spirit. And I think they go to these sacred sites. And I don't know if it was you or David, because I talked to David today. I said, I think it was you, because I'm in this my own time warp, but these technologies that connected us to spirit. Some people even say, okay, there's a physical technology, which we're getting in with like the pineal gland and reactive vibrational jewelry and stuff like that, activate your pineal, but that is our connection to spirit. But through these different foods, through the TV, which is recent, most people don't understand that this is, within 50 years, around that mark. Well, before that, you had all your spiritual practices. You said that's how you did it in your community. So you're watching this decimation happen very quickly at a rapid pace, and now spiral out of control where we need help. It's like, this has gone too far. So I was just curious if you wanted to share anything around any of the prophecies that you know about that you feel are important, any ways that we can help you, and any just suggestions from your knowledge of people who are going out there, they're listening, having their daily life like me. I'm doing the podcast, I'm doing these different things to try to live a good life, to help humanity, or even just survive and eat a ham sandwich if I'm going to go on Ancient Aliens or whatever. Any just suggestions for having more peace, more fulfillment, and living a good life from your view?
Well, I think one of the things that's happening right now is that I work with many different um, American Indian groups. Right now, I have a couple that is touring the country. They were in Pueblo, Colorado yesterday, and they're on their way to Idaho. And we'll eventually meet up in Chilala, I think it is, Washington. And they left their everyday jobs, and they're a couple from Albuquerque. They're both Pueblo Indians, and they bought a traveling trailer, and I think they already got their website up. It's called Galactic Collective, and they could certainly use. And the way that they finance their trips is that they go over there and do some healing and practices. They have many different modalities, and they make enough so that they can continue the next project site. And they were out there in California during the Alien Con, and then I was doing a lecture out there with a paranormal group in MUFON. But those people are doing a very good job of getting the Star Children, educating them, and also they also have the the information and the techniques for healing. And so they're going over there and they're doing like get-togethers. And so when they go over there, I mean, when they arrive, they set up like a shop, and then they inform them of what's happening. It's really amazing how a lot of young people come out to their activities, and they go through their usual things, and they both teach them a lot. But that's one group that I would really want them to have some type of a financial help, because they're really doing it out of their heart, and they can also talk with a lot of different groups throughout the universe. I guess I don't ask them when they come visit me here. We all sit down and we have a lot of exchange, a lot of information. And so the other thing that I do is that I go to a lot of these conventions and I do a lot of workshops. And they usually advertise for the workshops, but then again, it's very difficult for me sometimes because they only give you enough to pay for.
Clifford, I don't know if you can hear me, but you froze. Uh-oh. Darn it. Shoot. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to try to call Clifford's phone. If you can see me, I'm going to call Clifford. Hopefully he's still there. See if this is going to keep going. Getting lit up. Hey, Clifford, you froze. Do you want to pop back in? See if that'll work? You just stopped talking. We could either... What's that? Oh, it just went blank. Oh, shoot. Maybe just try to X out and come back in so that way you can... Oh, yeah, that could make sense. Okay. What's that? Oh, I didn't even realize I was on mute. Everybody watching, technical difficulties. Clifford lives in the boonies, and he powers his internet through battery. So now he's getting more battery so we can close this up. So appreciate the patience. Hopefully this will be recorded. Just checking Facebook to make sure I'm live. So that will be good. Oh, yep. It's just me talking to myself. Perfect. Cool. If you guys are watching, then maybe you can throw some jokes into the bottom there, and we'll just kind of wait for Clifford Hey, Clifford. Oh, do you want to? I think you got to enter in the call again, because you did. Oh wait, okay, yeah, no, you're here. I got you. Okay, perfect. Okay, 1 second. I'll pop you back in. Good. Here we go. All right, back in the game. You just got to do the unmute again in the mute button. That bottom left. Still muted. If you look, remember when you, I don't know what you're looking at for your screen, but it's bottom left corner. I'll let you know when I can hear you. If you can see that bottom row. Oh yeah, I think you just did it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, we did it. All right, cool. Well, I definitely wanted you to finish what you're saying. We kind of had a technical glitch, but that's okay. So I'll let you continue where you were sharing last, but you're talking about your friends and they come to your house. These galactic collective, they come to your house and you hang out and do some work there. That's the last thing we heard.
Yep. Whenever there's a meeting and they set up shop and they invite, I think they send out a flyer and they set up a place where they can, something's wrong with my internet.
Yeah, I think it went a little bit. Oh, there we go. I think it went a little bit wonky for me too. You might. There you go. You're good.
Okay. Well, they travel the country and they go and set up a shop, so to speak, and then they invite these star children and others, and they talk about, they all have an interchange of what who they are, what they're doing, and how they became, where they came from, and just I really haven't participated in their field activities. I've been to their Albuquerque site where they just talk about things that they see or hear or experience, and they talk to me a lot about it. And so I try to explain to them, but they're far superior knowledge-wise than I ever will be because they're star children. So that's it's quite an experience. So that's one group that I work with.
Amazing. I'll check those guys out. So I guess I was going to ask, I was getting close to wrapping it up because I know that you have some things to do, but again, you can feel free to elaborate as long as you want. And I was just going to kind of open up the floor to say, is there anything that you wish that I had asked? Is there anything that you want to share as far as some of your teachings, histories, philosophies, prophecies, or also, and we'll mention that you and David are going to come together for the first time in Sedona and do some of these teachings, because just like you, he said he'll only share so much on the video screen, but when you're in person, it's open up to more, and there's more of a vibrational download. There's more information that comes through. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit as well.
Okay. Well, the only thing that I can say right now at this point is that what this country is going through, this whole mess that's happening with the people, and it's a big lie. I think that a lot of people did not see this for a long time. A lot of these are false flag operations. The Indians knew about that. We knew about what's that, 9/11, 3 weeks before, I mean, 2.5 months before it happened. Our uncles and grandfathers knew about World War II before it happened. We knew about Challenger before it happened. So these are the events that have been given to the Indian people. But what has happened in the last 5, 6 years now is that somebody in the Zuni world has either come into play or that they don't say these uh, premonitions or visions anymore. I don't know whether it's the Zuni themselves or whether somebody intervened for them not to talk about what is coming in the future. So this caused a lot of questions about 2 years ago, where they were given these visions, and but I'm still going to find out who came up with that. And right now, because of the welfare system is real heavy on Indian reservations, they're really in control of all the Indian tribes, like the Catholic Church did. And a lot of them is fear and same thing, fear and control. I remember talking with the older people that they would not do anything because they threatened them with taking their what do you call it, the EBT cards or food stamp away from them. They threatened them with taking away their house. They threatened them with a lot of different things that are directly related to the government welfare program system, which in a lot of cases are really not because they're entitled to them. Even the medical profession or the medical services that is available to the American Indian people, zero cost, is not being political. So there's a lot of things that are happening, and I think it's because of the infiltration of all the different uh, ways of the American government, because they place those individuals to run those programs, and they're from the same tribes. Federal government and the Indian tribes now of what happened in the past when the religious groups would also infiltrate and work with a tribal leadership at those times and create these wars among each other. So nothing has changed. It's just a brand new day. It's the horse of a different color. It's the same horse, but it's a different color with little feathers on it now. So it's very hard to convince uneducated people about what they're doing to them because they're used to 500 years of this type of control. So I think that as time goes on, I would like for you folks or yourself to come up with some very specific questions on a topic, and I would certainly be glad to work with you on that or pass the information on. Because I've studied in many different arenas, in different areas, whether it be history, technology, psychology. So I think that the best approach for us to do future interviews is to have some very specific questions relating to a topic that is past, present, or even future, because and they're all interrelated. If you look at if you look at the Georgia stones, you know there's also prophecies about those things. If you look at what is going on in the people from all different nations coming in, and those are the ones that were also predicted or prophesized hundreds of years ago. And then the destruction of our land was also prophesied. So again, the technological part of it is, like I say, was the moon landing, the 9/11, the Challenger blow up, and those were seen before it actually happened. So on timelines, the Indians knew about that. And the reason that the other Indian tribes do not get those messages is because they were dispersed from their sacred lands where they can actually speak to those non-human entities or invisible multidimensional beings because of the organizations that were put in place, and also stealing of all their ways to communicate. So now I think that we'll go into more specific things, and this was sort of like an introductory to get used to what we're doing right now. So there's many other things, and I have a lot of information on the network that I don't even look at myself. But if you want to elaborate on some of those things, they were just like gloss over because of the time constraints and also subject matter at that time. But now we have to go into that second phase of things that are held back due to the disclosure and the government in turmoil, or rather in chaos, making it look like chaos. But so there's other things too that history, other Indian tribes have talked about. I think a lot of them are misinterpreted, and there's also a lot of pseudo Indians. They claim to know this stuff that will have no bearing on what the real stories are. So this is where we'll look at a lot of things. I actually go out to those people that make those stories up, and so far most of them has been running away from me. I think the reason is that there's been a lot of people that have been exposed, and there's also because their primary objective is is corporate profit motivation. That's all it is. You can look at many Indians. I think the number of American uh, Indian ancestry or hard Indian stuff, I think it far exceeds the true enrollment numbers of the American Indian. So that was put in place by also the government under the Indian Self-Determination Act, which caused a lot of harm to those Puebla that get direct services from the government, and is based on population, not based on DNA. You might look at the broadcast I did with a guy by the name of John Polk, Polk, and I went into a very detailed discussion of Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren. If she's going to run for president, which she says she does, I had asked in that interview for many specific things to qualify her as a Cherokee Indian. And it's out there, and I believe that in order to be fair with the rest of us American Indian people, I think she should at this time put out information to verify her enrollment and her content as an American Indian, and that will clear up a few things. So that's one thing that I would like to see happen with other people, because they're a detriment to our whole financial system. Because when it comes to Indian preference, you deprive the real Indian of education benefits. For example, like in Ivy League schools, American Indians are entitled to tuition-free education. And if Elizabeth Warren took that advantage to her own self, I think she should pay that money back so that other American Indians would get an Ivy League education. These are the things that I talk about. It's nothing. It's nothing the American Indian history straight and to at least interpret some of the things that the average American don't know about. They don't even, most of them don't even know who the Vice President of the United States is. So I think that this information should be made available to the rest of the American Indian community as part of their educational uh, project. So I think at this time my throat is kind of giving away. I need to get a shot of spirit. So I let it go for this time, and we'll get back together.
Clifford, thank you so much for sharing all that, and thank you for coming out and sharing what your knowledge is and doing what it takes to get it out there. Is there? I know you're going to be doing something around August 5th with David in Sedona, but is there? If people want to contact you, is there anything that you use? Do you send them to websites or anything, or are you off the grid on that sense?
Well, you know, the one that right after David and I meet together is that conference with David Wilcock and Corey Good in Loveland, Colorado. So I'm already on that one. I think that I'm going to give a presentation there. So that's the first one that I'll be going out on. So the website is already up, and my presentation or my pictures in there already. So they told me that I'll be up there. And it's part of that service to others and disclosure. And I talk primarily about the American Indian stuff. And also about things like the inner world people, about why UFOs have appeared in more so than ever. And the contact has already been begun way long time ago that we just don't know it yet, or the other people of the Indians have known it for a long time. So I think this would be very good information. Again, I want to stress that this information is my own teachings from many different sources, but the primary one is that my teachings from my own system in Zuni, from my elders, and all the things that are connected with it, spirituality, ceremonialism, rituals, and practices. So I'll leave it at that.
Awesome, Clifford. Well, thank you so much for your time. So much love and respect for you. I'm excited to see you in Sedona, and we'll just keep the conversation going for next time. I'm excited. So thanks for everything, and have a great day.
Hello, Juan.